Well, yes and no. I've had the pieces of this puzzle for a while now, but I only just this morning put them together. And the no part of it is that uh, it's not that they're now smarter than WotC. It's not that players are now smarter. It's it's actually that they've always been. Players have always been smarter than WotC, and that's not a huge realization, but it actually is maybe the biggest thing that defines our entire industry. And I just got so excited when I realized this that I just needed to make a video about it. And this really is a situation where you have the people using the product are smarter and know how to do it better than the people making it. What a weird situation. And this goes a lot deeper than I think even players realize. And not even I think I know. This is not something that players put together because nobody puts these things together. It's only somebody like me, maybe, who has just way too much time on their hands to think about these things, or who's been thinking about them for a very long time, or both. It's that WotC doesn't know how to design a game. And if you've seen my What is a Game video, you'll see that really no game company knows how to design a game. And this made a lot of game designers very angry. You can see all the thumbs down in that video. They got so angry, in fact, that they banned me from their Facebook group. And, well, that was after turning into a bunch of 6-year-olds. Because they all collectively realized, despite me not explicitly saying it in the video, or even in the thread that I made for the video to get their feedback, that it wasn't really pointing out that none of them knew how to design a game. But checking out the video, they all realized very quickly, oh, he's telling us what a game is. And that means that none of us knew beforehand what a game was, and that none of us have ever designed a game. And when they put those things together, they got very mad. And we have a different situation with WotC here. WotC is not really acting like a bunch of 6-year-olds. They're not mad. What we have is a situation where the decisions of Wizards of the Coast are made by people who don't understand the game, period. Well, it's not really a game, but that's because it's designed with the intent of people who don't understand it as a game. And players are very, very sensitive to these kinds of things, but it's really important to understand the history, actually, because this has been the case from the beginning. And when I say the beginning, I mean going all the way back to Magic's design by Richard Garfield at the University of Pennsylvania with the East Coast Playtest Group. Or, wait, was it Pennsylvania? Yeah. Pretty sure it was. But whatever the college was, they did not figure out anywhere near the things that players very quickly figured out as soon as the game got into the real world. One of the major things was they didn't realize that nobody would like ante. As soon as the game got out into the real world and people started buying it and players got it into their living rooms and kitchens and whatnot, and got out onto playgrounds, nobody wanted to play with ante. Nobody. And it was very quickly banned. It was one of the first things they banned. And they also didn't like, well, at least Richard didn't like the idea of banning or restricting cards. And he also was initially against the idea of limiting cards to 4 per deck. I think there there's the fireside chat with Scaff Elias and Peter Adkison where they talk about this whole thing. There's several interviews that Scaff does, and he gives a lot of really good background on this, where a lot of the initial decisions that they made were, or at least that Richard made, were wrong, but that they figured out through tournament play, and they figured out through people getting feedback and actually turning it into a competitive scene that needed to be taken seriously. They figured out all the things that ruined that competition, or at least, a certain number of them. They made a lot of compromises, and one of them, of course, was the restricting of cards. And as Scaff puts it, it was a good short-term fix, but a terrible long-term fix, because what happened was limiting the cards that, were problematic to one didn't really stop them from dominating the format. It meant that the players that had them in their hands, or in their decks at least, were almost guaranteed to win. So all of those people rose to the top. Those cards became very expensive. And from a design point, that's exactly what they hit on. And they didn't take that information and realize, oh, we actually need to balance our game and take this math seriously, which is extremely ironic considering the origin of Magic. It's still difficult as a designer for me to wrap my head around the fact that the East Coast playtesters and Richard Garfield designed Magic from the ground up, invented a new genre, were in a math program specifically figuring out all the different variations of these possibilities, and they didn't spend time on it. Like, it's just baffling. I don't know how they didn't figure out all these things ahead of time. But for some reason they didn't. And it's kind of strange. I mean, I guess maybe the instinct was just that, the game should be fun, and if you had to do some hard math for it, that it meant that it wouldn't be fun. But that's not something you're telling the player to do. That's something you're doing on the back end so the player doesn't have to. When you don't do the math, as you can see, you end up with a situation where you now have invented a collectible card game where your company now has an incentive to make it pay to win, and you didn't do the work ahead of time to make the game balanced, and so it's just kind of a runaway train crash. It's never going to get better. And from the beginning, players have always been smarter than WotC. And it's not that everybody at WotC is, stupid. There are extremely intelligent people who are designing Magic, and always have. People like Scaff Elias, and the other I forget who led the DCI in the beginning. His name is even in the interview. If I had made some notes beforehand, I could have referenced that. But all of the people at the beginning and people who were in early design, I mean, they had so much ground to cover way too quickly. I mean, it really was, of course, the runaway success of Magic that made it difficult to keep up with. But still, I mean, they had 2 years ahead of time to do all that math, and they just never took it seriously. And after the fact, I think there was even still some backlash about, taking out cards like dual lands. I'm sure that was something that they didn't want to do. They probably didn't want to restrict the cards at first. I know Richard Garfield didn't want to restrict or ban cards. And then very quickly, when it came back in DCI that, well, this kind of breaks the game and makes it unplayable, he was like, oh, okay, yeah, I see why that could be a problem. And this isn't just a thing with Magic the Gathering. This is with, Dungeons and Dragons and every other game out there too. But it's becoming really apparent as a company from WotC that with all of their products, they have no idea how to design a game. And it's not that they need to watch my video. I mean, technically that is the only source of that information currently on the internet. but you could still figure it out for yourself if you're WotC. I mean, it's not that hard, and you know, players are giving them all the right answers. They're basically telling them what to do with Dungeons and Dragons, with the open game license, I mean, the Magic 30th debacle, and it's all of these people making these terrible, terrible decisions and not listening to the community. It's insane. Like, how do you run a company like that? And everybody is obviously saying and thinking the same thing, and everybody's making the same videos, reiterating all the same points. But, so I don't really want to go through all of that drama again with WotC here in this video, because that's not the point. The point is to point out that they don't know how to design a game, and that at this point, it is now undeniable that the people who are playing their quote-unquote games know better than they do, and that is just insane. I mean, when has that ever happened before? I mean, like, even in computers where, like, in electronics, like, there's the story with the head of Sony. There's a great video on this on YouTube from Low Spec Gamer, and it's the story where this guy, he's doing he's an opera singer, and he also studied physics. And so he gets really annoyed at the quality of the recording equipment that Sony's putting out. So he starts writing them letters about how to improve the design of their equipment, because he actually knows things about, I guess, like, I mean, he obviously knows about acoustics and about, sound quality, but he probably also knows some basic, electronics design. And he was probably getting down onto the hardware level when he was writing them these letters. And he eventually got hired by Sony, and he kind of redesigned their equipment, and now Sony is Sony. But that just, it's such a different thing than computers, and it's such a weird thing where, like, we don't have that kind of access, where people don't have computers at, like, in the computer industry, people have computers at home. They could write their own code, they can do their own projects, and I guess it was kind of expensive to do that before, but, like, there were still so many people doing it that a lot of the solutions were figured out. And it's so weird that so many of the same people are in the gaming industry, and they don't apply this kind of rigor, that they don't realize that logic is simply what governs game mechanics, and that the sentiment is entertainment, and that those two things are very easily resolved at every single turn, and that when you see what that outline is, you see it ends with showing you the picture of a real game. And people understand these things at an intuitive level. They know you should not have to buy, or you should not ever see a company sell 4 booster packs for $1,000 of proxies. And for a company to not see that is confusing to a lot of people, but the realization, I think, goes over everyone else's heads right now. It's certainly going over people like Rudy's head, and people who continue to make Magic content and still treat it like a game, when it is so obvious right now. WotC doesn't know how to design a game. They don't know how to design Magic. They don't know how to design Dungeons and Dragons. They don't know how to manage these properties. And even if players don't know how to design games either, players are, at least seemingly right now, much more competent at pointing out very obvious fixes without even knowing something like, a grand unified theory of game design. very simple fixes that make the entire industry better, like having an open game license. Like, why would you ever, as a company, establish something like that? Get a sister company like Paizo, started by Lisa Stevens, one of the founding members of WotC, and then somehow think that you're going to close the open game license? Like, what? This is beyond stupid. This is ignorance. These are people who don't understand what they're doing. It's not stupid. It's ignorance. They lack the knowledge of what to do. And it seems like right now players know. And so right now, yeah, players are smarter than WotC. But it seems like also they've been smarter than WotC for a very long time. And that's weird. Where else do you find that? What kind of industry is this? Where, first of all, the main companies who are successful don't know what to do. Konami doesn't understand how to make a game. They don't understand how to make Yu-Gi-Oh! Whatever company makes Pokemon, they very much are not trying to make a game. You know, MetaZoo's a mess. Flesh and Blood is tragically terrible. Video games are a disaster right now and have always been a disaster. I mean, my God, most early video games are designed to hate players like they're made for an arcade, like they're trying to pump quarters out of them. But because there's no quarters, they just take away their happiness. Like, I swear to God, early video game designers hated players. Like, I am convinced early video game designers just flat out hated players. Like, I don't even know why you would bother making something like that. Like, it's this like sadistic, super villain. Like, I'm going to make this little thing and it's going to be all, flashy, and I'm going to give it cool cover art, and I'm going to give it a cool name, and I'm going to tell people, oh, it's going to be fun. It's an adventure. You're going to love it, but actually it just tortures people. Like, people, like, I get why things like Tetris are fun and why puzzles are a good way to waste time, but I don't call puzzles games, and I would never design something branded as a game that has no, or that doesn't give people the ability to win. Like, when your game is so hard, and I'm talking about Tetris here, where the actual design had to take into account the level cap in Tetris takes into account the theoretical limit of human reflexes. Like, that was the limit that the designers thought humans could go to. They thought, well, if we put that any higher, there's no way, like, anybody could ever do it. So this is the highest that even, like, super almost unrealistically, like the very limit of realistic is where we're going to put the end of Tetris. And there's not even a point to winning Tetris. Like, if you make a bot to win Tetris, like there's some great hackers out there who've put together Tetris solutions, and the ending screen, I think, is just the Tetris palace flying off into space. I mean, it kind of looks cool, but, like, wow, it's just designed to waste your life. You will have gained nothing except wasted time by playing something like Tetris. I mean, I guess if you were competing, you would be socializing with other people. That would be better. But I'm talking about Tetris because, again, these things all loop back onto each other. I'm pointing out for you that Tetris is an easy example. A more complicated example is Dungeons and Dragons. Can you wrap your head around the fact that Dungeons and Dragons isn't a game? If you can't wrap your head around that, look at it from a different angle. Did TSR know how to design a game? When WotC bought it and they took it over, did they know how to design a game? No, neither of them did. Something like GURPS, by the way, only comes close almost by accident. I mean, well, the intention to make a universal RPG, I would say, is a genuine innovation. It is confusing to me why Dungeons and Dragons wouldn't do that. It seems like you'd want to expand your marketability. I don't know how GURPS didn't beat out Dungeons and Dragons, especially with all of the amazing supplements they had. It's just a flat out better game. But yeah, I mean, there are still quite a lot of limitations, but they did a pretty good job redesigning. Was it 4th edition? I think for GURPS, 4th or 5th edition. I think maybe there were some problems with 4th, and then later on they fixed them in like a 5th edition, and then later on I think it maybe got a little kind of confused. I think they kind of went back on themselves and kind of ruined it again. But somewhere in there you can piece together. If you're a good enough GM, you can piece together from different editions, sort of a GURPS best of, and once you can put together a good narrative, you'll end up having a pretty fun time. But yeah, that's just all work that some smart player is going to have to do, apparently, because right now we are in a situation where companies don't know how to design their own products. And I don't know what else to say about that. I don't know what to do about that except be a designer who does. I can only do my best, and I have tried to contact Wizards of the Coast and offer, and actually several times to help fix Magic, and every single time I've been given very rude and dismissive responses. And so WotC is going to just destroy themselves. Can't say I didn't try to help, and can't say everybody else didn't try to help as well, because everybody else is sure telling them what to do, and they're just not listening. So it's going to be a very interesting time of a whole industry of players not only incentivized to come up with better solutions, but now charged to do so by a company who almost overtly antagonizes their own player base. And this isn't every company. I mean, video games, I guess, aside, let's just talk about tabletop games. Yeah, not every company is a WotC. Most other companies actually seem like they care about their players, like they actually want to entertain them. WotC just seems like it wants to torture its players, both in game and in their lives, with their wallets, and just giving them a terrible company to have to deal with in order to get some kind of enjoyment out of their products. If there is any to be had anymore, I don't think so, and I think a lot of other people are thinking that too. So it's a very interesting time. I think a lot of smart people who have much better ideas than WotC right now are seeing all the same things that I'm seeing. And I think that a lot of smart people out there are probably going to start putting their better ideas to the test. And I think WotC is kind of making its own downfall, not just on its end. It's WotC has this habit of burning the fuse at every possible end it can find. It doesn't just want to ruin its own IPs. It wants to charge its community to be a competitor. And you know what? I think that's exactly what's going to happen. I think we're going to see a lot of people coming out with a lot of better products, a lot of better ideas, and it's all going to be in spite of Wizards of the Coast, who has now, I think, completely expended all goodwill they have ever had left with every product they've ever made with the entire community. I don't think there is any goodwill left for WotC, and I don't know how they can bring themselves out of this. I told Rudy, I told several other people, and I even warned WotC. I think if they continue down this road, they're going to be dead before the end of 2023. And yeah, I think that's a good place to leave it. I may have a follow-up to this video later. If I have some more thoughts, I'm going to keep watching some of those fireside chats, especially with Scaff Elias. But what an interesting time we live in. I guess a blessing and a curse.